Hello, hello. Happy, what is this day called? Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. Man, I hit go live at 12:12 purposefully, but it didn't really go live until 12:13. Hello, Genevieve. Welcome in. So today we're going to attempt to finish out Real Alchemy, a Primer of Practical Alchemy by Robert Allen Bartlett. And we are starting into chapter 15 today, which is entitled Antimony. All right. Oh my gosh, look, I forgot. I'm going to pull the microphone out. Hey, cool gamer, welcome. Can you hear my earrings? All right. Let's do it like this, and then flip that. Boop. Okay. Okay, let's do it. Antimony. It is often said that once you begin on the alchemical path, strange things begin in the form of coincidence or synchronicity to attract toward yourself information and materials that are required for your continued journey. This certainly was the case for me and antimony. I had just returned from the PRS class centered on the wonders of antimony and was anxious to start the work. Within a month, by an odd series of events, I found myself working underground in an antimony mine I did not know existed, only 16 miles from my home. Needless to say, I soon found myself in possession of all the fresh-picked antimony required for many experiments. Antimony has always held a special place in alchemy. Known from very ancient times, other names for antimony are mestum, aconite, stimi, and stibium, from which we get our symbol for the element Sb. Antimony is considered a toxic metal, very similar to arsenic. The fascination with this material led to abuse and scams, which caused the death of many who had heard of its healing virtues. This provoked Parliament in 1566 to forbid its use in medicine for about 100 years. Antimony is said to be the mineral of Malkuth. Earth is its planetary ruler. It contains the rays of all the other planets, and because of this, is said to be immortal. Its spirit is fixed to the sphere of Earth. Quote, the ancients knew about antimony, praising it very highly for its hidden medicinal virtues. During medieval times, a rediscovery of these virtues by Basil Valentine and the father of modern medicine, Paracelsus, caused considerable renewed interest. Both found antimony to be of extraordinary curative potency and wrote extensively about it. Valentine called antimony one of the 7 wonders of the world, praising it as the best blood-purifying agent available. He claimed to have used it for the cure of many diseases, including cancer. These claims were substantiated by Dr. Kerkring of Holland about 250 years later when he prepared and used antimonial tinctures in his medicinal practice. End quote. Frater Albus. There is a great power hidden in antimony, which is often depicted in alchemical images as a black dragon, a venomous serpent, a wolf, or an orb surmounted by a cross. The authoritative text on the many preparations of antimony is Basil Valentine's The Triumphal Chariot of Antimony, which first appeared around 1600, though others argue that it is 200 to 300 years older. Desert Rose, welcome in. Asuma, welcome everyone. Antimony ores. By far the most common source of antimony is the sulfide ore called stibnite, or Sb2S3, or antimony trisulfide. When the old texts speak of antimony, they are generally referring to this sulfide ore, And when speaking of metallic antimony, they designate it as Regulus or Little King. Stibnite very often has impurities of arsenic, mercury, bismuth, lead, and combined sulfur, and uncombined sulfur. So it is common practice to roast the ore prior to use in order to eliminate these as much as possible. Begin this roasting gently at about 90 degrees Celsius for a day, then slowly increase to about 250 degrees Celsius. Some consider that these common impurities earned the mineral the name antimonos, or not alone, from which we get our modern word antimony. A long, slow calcination will eliminate all of the sulfur and produce a very light gray to white antimony oxide suitable for many works. This calcination is at a much higher temperature than roasting, but keep it below 520 degrees Celsius, or melting will begin at the start. Later, as the sulfur vaporizes and the ore looks lighter, the temperature can be increased. Stir the powder around with an iron rod once in a while to assist the oxidation. Antimony oxide is somewhat volatile at these temperatures, so be sure not to overdo the time and temperature. This is outside work, or to be done under a fume hood. Kermis Mineral. One of the strange properties of antimony is that it acts as an acid or an alkaline material depending on its environment. They call this being amphoteric. Amphoteric. By taking advantage of this property, it is possible to purify stibnite, even low-grade ores, with a chemical process. The result of this purification is a red-brown powder called kermis, named after a dye of this color made from insects. Chemically, it is known as antimony oxysulfide. The preparation is easy, but involves some foul-smelling odor like rotten eggs. So again, this is outside work or in a fume hood. Start by grinding the ore to a fine powder, then set it aside until we need it. Now prepare a strong alkali solution by dissolving lye, which is sodium hydroxide, into rainwater. A 20 to 30% solution works well. This will get very hot as the lye dissolves, so add it slowly to avoid boiling. Also wear hand and eye protection. Start adding the powdered stibnite to the still hot lye solution while stirring with a non-metal rod. The amount of ore added depends on its quality, but it is better to add it in excess to the weight of lye used. We can do this alkaline leaching several times to pull out all of the antimony. The solution can even be heated to near boiling to hasten the dissolution of the stibnite. After an hour of digestion, let the solution settle a bit, then filter it through a wad of glass wool. This solution is very caustic and will eat right through paper fibers. You can find glass wool at aquarium suppliers. The resulting solution will be of a deep golden yellow color. Into this solution, slowly pour in a 10 to 30% solution of acetic acid until the solution pH is 7 or neutral. This is the smelly part mentioned earlier. A lot of hydrogen sulfide is released, which is quite toxic, so definitely be outside and upwind. As the acetic acid is added, you will begin to see a red-brown solid form and fall to the bottom. This is the Kermis mineral. Allow the solids to settle, then decant the clear liquid from the top and save it aside. This liquid contains mostly sodium acetate, which can be recovered for use in the acetate work. Its previous association with antimony makes it even more valuable. The still moist Kermis is washed several times with rainwater, covering it with 10 to 20 times its volume of water and letting it settle, then decant and repeat. Place the wet solid into a dish to dry. The resulting red-brown powder, the Kermis, is now cleansed of many impurities that are associated with antimony ores, including the alumina and silica matrix. Chemically, the powder represents a complex mixture of antimony trisulfide and antimony trioxide. Other alkalis will also work to dissolve the stibnite, such as potassium hydroxide, salt of tartar, even liquid ammonia. By altering the concentrations and order of mixing the acid and alkali solutions, the powder can be made to take on shades of canary yellow to brilliant orange to crimson red, as the particle size varies. Kermes is much easier to calcine to a light oxide powder because of its greater purity. Glass of antimony. Another property of antimony is that it is a glass former. Ancient glass and ceramic artifacts bear witness to this knowledge far back in time. Preparation of the glass begins with the calcination of stibnite or Kermes into the oxide. This conversion to the oxide need not be too rigorous, as a small proportion of the sulfide is needed to help form the glass. If you melt pure antimony oxide, you will see a beautiful orange liquid, but when it is cast and cooled, it will revert to an opaque yellowish-white crystalline mass. The presence of antimony sulfide mixed into the antimony oxide will promote the formation of transparent glasses of intense red, yellow, and orange shades. The finely ground antimony oxide, sulfide, is fused in a strong porcelain crucible at a temperature of about 700 to 1000, I almost said, about 700 to 1000 degrees Celsius. Sometimes even up to 1300 degrees Celsius. It helps to add a small amount of the raw stibnite powder in doing this to obtain a deep ruby red glass. Some use borax as a flux, but this often leads to problems in removing it later. In fact, some claim that borax, as well as aluminum lead, to alchemical death. In fact, some claim that borax, as well as aluminum, lead to alchemical death of the subject and avoid their use at all costs. When the crucible is 3/4 full and entirely molten, stick a thin iron rod into it and pull it out. Look at the glass adhering to the rod. If it is transparent, then it is ready. If it is cloudy, continue heating until it clarifies. However, do not overdo the fusion for too long, as the material will be volatilizing throughout the process. When the melt is ready, use tongs and quickly pour the liquid out into a wide flat dish of copper. Once cool, you will have the glass of antimony. It should be transparent and generally of a yellow to deep red tint, although by altering proportions and heating it is possible to obtain glasses of other colors, even green and blue. The glass is held by many to be preferred starting material for extracting the sulfur of antimony. Prior to extraction with one of the prepared menstruums, the glass must be ground to a very fine powder. Morning, Stony Faith. Welcome in. Vinegar of antimony. Stibnite is one of the few minerals that seem to undergo fermentation similar to making wine, but at higher temperatures. The resulting liquid is known as the vinegar of antimony, or the pure fixed spirit of antimony, and is nearly a universal menstruum for the mineral world, as well as a powerful medicine for internal and external use. Begin by grinding several pounds of stibnite to a fine powder. Roast the powder at about 90 degrees Celsius for a day to remove arsenic, mercury, and any free sulfur that may be present. After cooling the ore, mix 3 parts of it with 7 parts of distilled rainwater by weight. Seal in a flask and digest at 40 degrees to 50 degrees Celsius, shaking it frequently. This is the part that takes some time. Up to a year or longer is often allowed for the fermentation to occur. As the antimony spirit enters the water, you may perceive the liquid to be more viscous and soapy or foamy. This is a good sign the ore has opened. Now the flask of material is attached to a distillation train. Begin the distillation slowly at 80 degrees Celsius and slowly raise it to about 400 degrees Celsius over a period of 3 days. Let the apparatus cool completely. You should see a yellow to red sublimate on the walls of the glassware, or as a crust above the stibnite residue. Return the distillate to a residue, rinsing all of the sublimate from the walls. Repeat this distillation cycle 2 more times. The liquid from the final distillation is the vinegar of antimony. In this form, it is still a weak solution, but has excellent healing qualities of its own. Basil says it will eliminate all toxins from the body. We can concentrate this fixed spirit through distillation such that it will extract the sulfur from gold in a short time. The best way to approach this is by a 4x3 distillation to obtain 12 fractions. This separation opens other possibilities for medicinal use, but our interest now is in concentrating the vinegar. The name vinegar is applied to this liquid because of its fermentive origin and its acidic nature. And though it is not acetic acid, acetic balls. I think maybe acetic. And though it is not acetic acid nor sulfuric acid, the concentrate can reach a pH of 1. Test the pH of each of the 12 fractions and combine those which are most acidic. Distill this combined liquid into 4 equal parts and test the pH. Continue the process of distillation, testing, and combining until you have isolated the distillate with a pH of 1. This is the concentrated vinegar of antimony. The yield is generally small but very powerful medicinally, and as a menstruum, it will extract the essentials from virtually all of the mineral realm. Oil of antimony. There are many ways to obtain an oil from antimony, and the properties of these oils vary with their method of preparation. One of the most important and valuable of these is the fixed red oil. The preparation begins with the calcination of stibnite or kermis into the oxide form. The oxide is ground very fine and made into glass of antimony. The glass is powdered and then extracted with a strong solution of vinegar, or still better, with radical vinegar. Let the extraction continue for several weeks at about 40 degrees Celsius and agitate it once in a while, especially in the first few days, or it will coalesce into a thick mass. After this time, the solution will take on a golden to deep red color. Filter off the extract and repeat with fresh vinegar. Combine all of the extract and filter it into a distillation vessel. Gently distill the liquid until it becomes thickened. Then add some water to dissolve the residue and continue the distillation. Repeat this washing with water to remove as much of the acid as possible. This washing can also be performed using alcohol. In this case, ethyl acetate is formed and readily distills out, so the washing is faster. The resulting residue will appear as a golden brown gummy resin. Place the resin into a suitably sized distillation vessel and proceed to distill, as in the acetate work. Drops of a blood red oil will come over, which are carefully collected by dissolving them into alcohol. Rinse any of the oil adhering to the glassware out with alcohol. Let's try again. Rinse any of the oil adhering to the glassware out with alcohol and combine all of the liquid into a container. Seal and allow it to stand for several days, then decant the clear tinted extract for use. This fixed tincture of antimony has powerful healing properties unrecognized by modern medicine. Star Regulus. The final preparation of antimony we will briefly examine is that of the so-called star Regulus of antimony. This preparation is considered to be an advanced alchemical work, as there is some danger involved and requires the operator to have developed laboratory skills. Many of the ancient stages describe this operation in extremely veiled terms. Some of the clearest writings come from such notables as Irenaeus Philalethes, Irenaeus Philalethes, Nicholas Flamel, and even Isaac Newton. In fact, this path is often referred to as the Flamel path. Taken to completion, it leads to the confection of the Philosopher's Stone, and as such, represents the summit of laboratory alchemical works in the dry way. The term Regulus of antimony has always been used to refer to the metallic antimony reduced from its ore. When it is well produced, or when it is well prepared and purified, you will see a starry pattern in the surface of the metal. The metal itself is quite brittle and reduces to a powder fairly easily. Hidden in the Regulus is the spirit of antimony. Quote, in antimony are mercury in the Regulus, sulfur in the redness, and salt in the black earth which sinks to the bottom, which three, corrected, separated, and finally united together in the proper manner of art, so that fixation be obtained without poison, give an opportunity to the artificer to approach the stone of fire. End quote. Isaac Newton. Hey, welcome in. No capitals. Awesome. Oh, man. Yeah, the Dolores. So fascinating. Man, some of those chapters in that book were pretty triggering, and other chapters were like mind-blowing. Even some of the triggering chapters were mind-blowing. I love it. So is this book. The most common way of producing the Regulus begins with Stibnite, or the Kermis Mineral. Isaac Newton recommended 2 parts Stibnite, 1 part of iron fillings, and 4 parts of burnt tartar. The mixture is fused in a crucible and allowed to cool slowly. A slag or scoria forms at the surface and easily comes off the metal with a hammer blow. Save this scoria from the first reduction of the ore to metal. It contains the seed of gold. The metal or regulus at the bottom of the crucible may show some signs of starring, but generally requires additional purification by grinding and fusion with nadir to bring out the stars. The use of iron in the reduction produces iron sulfide by taking the sulfur from the stibnite, leaving the antimony free as metal which sinks to the bottom. Other methods of obtaining the regulus include the use of nadir in the mixture. For example, 12 parts stibnite, 5 parts iron filling, 6 parts niter, and 9 parts raw tartar. Even small iron nails can be used for the reduction in place of iron fillings. The inclusion of raw tartar is said to increase the yield of the seed of gold in the scoria during the first fusion. The extract proportions will depend on the quality of the stibnite you began with. A word of caution: the mixtures with nadir are especially a form of gunpowder, which you will be placing into a very hot crucible. Add material slowly, or you will soon find out why the ancients called this process detonation. The regulus, once obtained, is ground and mixed with 12. Man, I just got like my stomach just you imagine doing that part, putting it in, and like the anxiety of it, or like maybe that's something that would be something you have to, about the mastering of knowing what you're doing, or to overcome that and use reverence and intuition and respect. Intention. The regulus, once obtained, is ground and mixed with twice its weight of niter, then fused again in a crucible to purify it. This purification may be repeated several times in order for the starry qualities to develop in the metal. This star regulus of antimony is also called the mineral or the martial regulus because of the iron used in its production. The regulus has healing powder of its own. An extraction of the powdered metal with spirit of turpentine turns a deep red. Removal of the turpentine leaves an oil, which is dissolved into spirit of wine and used for all pulmonary illnesses. This is called the balm of antimony. By far the greatest interest surrounding the regulus is its fixed spirit or mercury, which can be transferred to other metals in order to reanimate them and awaken their generative powder. This path leads to confecting the Philosopher's Stone. In one approach to this path, the mineral regulus is alloyed with about twice as much pure silver and a small amount of copper to produce a lunar Venusian regulus, which has a beautiful violet color. This regulus is then amalgamated with purified metallic mercury, washed and then distilled. The amalgamation and distillation is repeated 7 to 10 times and is referred to as letting the eagles fly. The regulus of antimony will not amalgamate very easily with mercury metal, so the silver is added to absorb the fixed spirit of antimony and transfer it to the mercury. The silver then, often called the doves of Diana, acts as a medium to transfer the life force of the antimony into the mercury. After the distillation, the residue of silver, which remains in the retort, called now the dead doves of Diana, is cleaned and used again. With each cycle of amalgamation and distillation, the mercury metal becomes more enlivened and ultimately is called animated mercury, containing the generative power of the metallic realm. It is the fertile field wherein the seed of metals is sown. Purified gold metal is seeded into this animated mercury and digested over a long period. The matter will pass through a black stage, then gradually whiten, and finally redden into the ferment, or red stone, which can be multiplied using fresh animated mercury. The red stone forms the basis of the elixir, or universal medicine, for man and metals. It also has the power to transmute the lesser metals into gold, but it must become dedicated to that purpose by a further process called incineration, which we will talk about later. After this process, it serves only for transmutations of metal and not for medicinal use. Other approach for using the star regulus to confect the stone, without the use of metallic mercury, reunites the regulus with gold through a long digestion with a menstruum derived similarly to the urine alkahest in a cooled vessel. The same progression of colors from black to white to red will be observed. In this case, the regulus is called the mercury, or our luna, and the gold is called sol, or sulfur. The liquid menstruum is also often referred to as mercury, to confuse you, or is called the secret fire. It is the catalyst which unites the contrary metals. Thus, you will often see pictures of the sun and moon being united by Mercury in alchemical works. Dang, dude. Isn't that good? That was chapter 15. One second. My mom texted me. I'm going to read that real quick, and then I'll get into 16. Shoot. I'll probably be a little late for that. Or maybe I can move things up with Dixie. Okay. Itching nose. Chapter 16. The Seed of Metals. Quote, matter is no other than a mere vapor, which extracted from the elementary earth by the superior stars, as by a sidereal distillation of the microcosm, which sidereal hot infusion, with any airy sulphurous property descending upon inferiors, so acts and operates, that in those metals and materials is implanted spiritually and invisibly. So wait, that in those metals and minerals is implanted spiritually and invisibly a certain power and virtue, which fume afterwards resolve itself in the earth into a certain water, from which mineral water all metals are thenceforth generated and ripened to their perfection, and thence proceeds this or that metal or mineral, according as one of the three principles acquires dominion. End quote. Basil Valentine from the Triumphal Chariot of Antimony. I'm reading that again. Matter is no other than a mere vapor, which extracted from the elementary earth by the superior stars, as by a sidereal distillation of the macrocosm, which sidereal hot infusion, with any airy sulphurous property descending upon inferiors, so acts and operates, that in those metals and minerals is implanted spiritually and invisibly a certain power and virtue, which fume afterwards resolves itself in the earth into a certain water, from which mineral water all metals are thenceforth generated and ripened to their perfection, and thence proceeds this or that metal or mineral, according as one of the three principles acquires dominion. End quote. I understood that a lot better that time. Hey, welcome in, Code. Awesome. Awesome. Dude. Hey, yeah, we missed you at the reading yesterday. It was juicy, dude. Lemuria, portals, Atlantis. Fascinating stuffs. So welcome in. So that was Basil Valentine, Triumphal Chariot of Antimony. So today, products from the mineral realm are not considered to have seeds or even to come from seeds, but in the works of alchemy, this is a great secret of the art. Michael Sendivogius, in his New Chemical Light, says, quote, nature is not visible, though she acts visibly. She is a volatile spirit who manifests herself in material shapes, and her existence is in the will of God. End quote. Quote, she is one and produces different things, but only through the mediate instrumentality of seed. End quote. Quote, nature performs whatsoever the sperm requires of her. Nature works on seed. End quote. Recall from above that Sendivogius called seed the quintessence of a thing, its most perfect digestion and decoction, or the radical moisture. He further states that there is only one seed, and that their difference is only caused by the place, the womb, and degree of coction, but it is perfectly ripened in gold. The, quote, Collectanea Chemica, end quote, published around 1650, describes it thus, quote, the seed of metals is what the sons of wisdom have called their mercury, to distinguish it from quicksilver. which it nearly resembles, being the radical moisture of metals. This, when judiciously extracted, without corrosives or fluxing, contains in it a seminal quality whose perfect ripeness is only in gold. In the other metals, it is crude, like fruits which are yet green, not being sufficiently digested by the heat of the sun and action of the elements. We observe that the radical moisture contains the seed, which is true, yet it is not the seed, but the sperm only, in which the vital principle floats, being invisible to the eye. End quote. And then quote again. Though the seed is the most glorious of all created things, yet the womb is its life, which causes the putrefaction of the enclosing grain or sperm, brings about the congelation of the vital atom, nourishing and stimulating its growth by the warmth of its own body. End quote. The salt or body determines the fire or seed to burn in a characteristic manner here in the physical world. Salt is the womb wherein the sulfurous nature and the mercurial nature unite to produce the living chemical child, in which the celestial fire incarnates. Everything produces seed after its own nature, and so the sages often remind us that the proper seed placed into the proper matrix is the work of the artist, and then nature takes over and is all too happy to bring the material to fruition. The sages tell us that you won't get a dog by planting a wheat seed, nor a cow from a hen's egg, so do not expect to grow any metal without a metallic seed. So where do we find the seeds of metals? The Collectanea Chemica tells us quite plainly and naturally that the seed of metal is found in their ore, just as they occur in nature. Certainly, then, the most coveted seed is the seed of gold, as gold contains the most perfect reflection of the celestial fire. Quote, the stone you seek, we said and still affirm, is only gold, brought to so high perfection as it is possible, which though a firm compacted body is, yet by art's direction and nature's operation, made a tingling spirit which will never fade. End quote. Philalethes. Hey, welcome in. Yay, it's good to see you, Tom. Awesome-o. Juice. It's good. So, let's get a sip. Just as the alchemists describe many degrees of fire, so do they also describe many grades of gold, and we must often discern which gold they are speaking of. Quote, in order that you may desire nothing that belongs to the theory and practice of our philosophy, I will tell you that, according to philosophers, there are 3 kinds of gold. End quote. Another quote. Quote, the first one is an astral gold, whose center is in the sun, which with its rays communicates it, at the same time as its light, to all heavenly bodies under it. It is an igneous substance and a continuous examination of solar corpuscles, which, being in the perplexal flux and reflux, because of the movement of the sun and the stars, fills up the whole universe. Everything is penetrated by this gold in the immensity of heavens upon earth, and in its bowels we breathe continuously this astral gold. The solar particles penetrate our bodies and are carelessly exhaled from them. The second one is an elemental gold, that is, the purest and most fixed portion of the elements, and of all substances composed by them, so that every sublunar being of the 3 genera contains in its center a precious grain of this elemental gold. The third one is the handsome metal, whose brightness and inalterable perfection give it a price, which make it to be considered by all men as the sovereign remedy for all evils and needs of life, and as the only foundation of greatness and human power. End quote. And that's from the Hermetical Triumph. Another early writer describes the astral gold thus, quote, it is a universal fluid, a living one, extended throughout all nature, which penetrates all beings, It is the most subtle of all things, incorruptible in its essence, and permeating the infinite space. The sun and planets are but condensed states of this universal principle, distributing their abundances through their palpitating hearts, and sending them to the forms of the lower worlds and to every being, acting through their own centers, and impelling those forms to a higher state in the path of perfection. This spirit may be obtained in the same way as it is in communicating to earth from the stars. The forms in which this living principle becomes fixed become perfect and permanent. Thus, the philosophical stone in the ultimate that can be made using it, making that which is volatile to become fixed. End quote. And that's by Johannes Trithemius. Another quote here. Quote, "The gold of the wise is proper. The gold of the second, the gold of the wise is proper the gold of the second species. For when this gold is perfectly calcinated and exalted to the cleanness and whiteness of snow, it acquires by magistry a natural symphony for the astral gold, of whom it has become visibly a true magnet. It attracts and concentrates in itself so great a quantity." Let's try again. "It attracts and concentrates in itself so great a quantity of astral gold and of solar particles, received from the continuous emanation of them done in the center of the sun and moon, that it is in a disposition near to become the living gold of the philosophers." And that's from the Hermetical Triumph. Yeah, so juicy. All right, chapter 17, the Philosopher's Stone. According to Hermetic tradition, the Philosopher's Stone is manifest as a heavy crystalline substance, which is described as being quite similar to pulverized glass, ranging from crimson to saffron in color. It has no odor, it is not combustible, and yet melts easily, like wax, by candle flame alone, and readily dissolves into water or wine. The materials to make it are abundant, and to be had by anyone. Wow! The stone is said to have the power to cure all sickness, give back lost youth, and to transmute other metals into gold. The old adepts constantly assure us of its physical reality. There are exhibits in several European museums which are reportedly alchemically made gold. Even up to our current times, reports of successful transmutations are found. Near the end of the 19th century, alchemical transmutation was considered a dead issue. The elements are immutable. That was a quote. Then came the discovery of radioactivity and the fact that transmutation of elements was occurring naturally. In the 1960s, it was announced that the alchemist's dream had been realized when scientists formed a tiny amount of gold by bombarding a pool of mercury with high-energy particles. In the 1970s and 1980s, the work of the French biochemist Louis Couvrant revealed the possibility of elemental transmutation as a natural process in living systems and gave it the name biological transmutations. Dude, I need to message Stu. He needs to, or not needs to. I think he would love this book. He's a science professor. I want to know what he thinks. Okay. All right. Today, the controversy over cold fusion is still in process. Mother of pearls. Let me just take a sip and try again. Okay. Today, the controversy over cold fusion is still in progress, and quantum physics tells us the observer has an effect on the material world. The premises of alchemy seems to be far from a dead issue. The perfection and evolution of the alchemist is the true goal in all of this. We mentioned that one must become the living stone before being able to produce the tangible stone. The skills necessary for its production and the way to proceed are gradually revealed to the alchemist as his own transformation unfolds. The actual physical stone is regarded more as a final test or proof that he has been successful, although at that point the transmutation of base metals to gold will become a trivial pursuit. In the wrong hands, the stone could have a devastating effect on the world economy, for the stone could be made to multiply, not only in quantity, but in transforming power, where an ounce could produce 10,000 ounces of gold and cure hundreds of people at death's door. As Christopher Glasser wrote in his chemical textbook about 1650, would you ever feel safe walking down the street knowing that in your vest pocket lay the potential to create 10,000 ounces of gold? In the past, many were imprisoned and tortured to reveal the secrets of making gold. Do you think it would be any different today? Some say this is the reason why alchemy has been such a closely guarded secret by the adepts. How does that go? Quote, with great power comes great responsibility and the ability to attract great consequences, end quote. So that quote is actually from Christopher Glasser. Badass. I wonder if Stanley knows that. Probably. Quote, therefore the philosophers say their matter is in all things, yet have selected such subjects wherein the universal spirit is more abundantly contained and more concentrated and easier to be obtained, end quote. The Golden Chain of Homer. Divine Cinnabar. We've mentioned two of the commonly used paths for confecting the Philosopher's Stone, that of the wet way through lead acetate and the dry way through the star Regulus of antimony. The final method we examine is often called the way of the divine cinnabar. I save this for last because it is a dangerous operation requiring the use of the very toxic metallic mercury. The other two methods also present dangers and the use of toxic metals or toxic materials, but mercury is particularly insidious and can quickly contaminate an area which will then be very difficult to clean up. Some alchemists avoid working with mercury metal altogether because of the danger to themselves and those around them. The use of metallic mercury is well established in both Chinese and Indian alchemy as well. All of the laboratory skills you have developed in the lesser works will be called into play in these works, the great work, in order to avoid mishap. More than one alchemist has lost his life in this work, so be cautious and know the theory first before attempting the praxis. Metallic mercury, or common mercury, is a curious thing, liquid at normal temperatures, bright like silver, and heavy like gold. It seems poised to become any of the other metals. The slightest vibration sets it quivering. For some time, it seems alive. Dude, I used to be obsessed with the little bit of mercury and like heating and cooling units when I was younger. Just like tapping on them in the schools and shit. Anyways, just saying, it's magic. It seems alive. The ancients called it argent vine, living silver, or quicksilver, because it is always quick to move, but also because it is easily quickened with life. Being in the liquid state, mercury is still heavily influenced by the subtle spiritual energies around it. The basic idea behind the Mercury Work is that the mercury plays the part of the female and gold is the male. Their proper union results in the birth of the chemical child, the Philosopher's Stone. Of course, not just any old mercury and gold metals will work. They need philosophical preparation. The mercury must be purified before work can begin. Then, the purified mercury is reanimated or recharged with universal fire to awaken its generative power. The animated mercury is then digested with prepared gold in the proper proportion and regimen of heat until it passes through the black, white, and finally to the red stage or red stone, much the same as with the star Regulus of antimony mentioned earlier. Quote, gold is the true leaven of the elixir. Marriage will take place between the mercury menstruum, the female, and the sun, gold, the male. The woman is said to draw the sperm or seed of the gold. The seed of the noble metal will make the mercury like itself through digestion alone. End quote. Lintot, from Friend of the Dawn, circa 1700. Oh, man. History. Purification of mercury metal. We can buy high purity metal, or rather, mercury. We can buy high purity mercury, triple distilled, from the chemical supply store, but it is still a good idea to purify it in the old ways. It is not so much aimed at getting the mercury any more pure than exalting it alchemically and opening the body to receive new life. For this, take your mercury and wash it well with rainwater. Then squeeze it through a piece of chamois or some other thin, pliable leather. Now cover the mercury with dried and powdered sea salt. Mix these two completely using a mortar and pestle. Depending on the impurities in the mercury, the salt may darken, even to a blackness. Wash this dirty salt out using rainwater and repeat the salt washing once or twice. The mercury will retain some of the subtle essence of the salt, which is important for the rest of the processes. Put the mercury into a mortar and add an equal amount of sea salt. Saturate this mixture with strong distilled vinegar, about 10% acetic acid, and begin vigorously mixing the mass for about 10 minutes. Now wash this salt out with rainwater until the mercury appears shiny and bright. Press it through a chamois, yeah. There should be no residue left in the chamois. Chamois, maybe. I think chamois, yeah, the chamois. Maybe. The mercury should leave no trail when rolled across a smooth surface and should be without any appearance of scum at the surface. This mercury is now, quote, the field prepared and fit to receive our noble king, end quote. Animation of the mercury. Animation is described as the addition of etheric essences or principles in the etheric shell of a substance and awakening its generative virtue. There are many ways to animate mercury. We mentioned the most popular method earlier when discussing the Flamel path with the star Regulus of antimony. The simplest method is to use native gold alone with the purified mercury. Use a form of pure native gold, such as gold nuggets or gold dust, as obtained by panning in a river. The gold is reduced to a powder by grinding with salts and vinegar into a paste. Wash out the salt and let the gold dry. To 29 parts of purified mercury, add 1 1/4 parts of gold powder and grind them into a fluid amalgam. Wash the amalgam with water until it is clean and bright. Wipe the surface with a piece of paper towel until dry. Then place the dried amalgam into a tall, strong glass vessel and seal it well. Let this matter digest at about 40 degrees Celsius for 3 months. After 3 months, increase the temperature to 60 degrees Celsius and continue digestion for another 3 months. Quote, this action stirs up the hidden powder in the mercury, which, totally surrounding the noble metal, gradually dissolves it, releasing its powder into the dissolving menstruum, end quote. And then, quote, the mercury starts to acquire the subtle seed of the noble metal, thus being animated, end quote. Lintot, Friend of the Dawn, circa 1700. The result of this 6-month digestion is animated mercury. Be sure to make a sufficient quantity of this because the later operations of multiplication and augmentation of the stone will require it. This method of animation requires time, 6 months, but the manipulation of hazardous materials is kept to a minimum. The final method of mercury animation we will examine is the way of the divine Cinnabar. This process requires a great deal of care, as it is quite dangerous, but is held to be one of the most powerful ways to animate metallic mercury and produce the philosophical stone. We begin with metallic mercury purified with salt and vinegar as above. Mix the mercury with an equal amount of native sulfur in a mortar, grinding it together well. The matter will turn black during this process, forming mercury sulfide. Examine the matter closely with a magnifier. There should be no tiny globules of mercury remaining. Grind with additional sulfur if there are. The resulting black mass is a crude form of cinnabar, which is the sulfide ore of mercury. We can proceed with the black variety of cinnabar, or we can improve this matter by sublimation to obtain the beautiful orange variety of cinnabar, which is best, but difficult and dangerous to perform. Now mix the cinnabar, black or orange, with an equal weight of iron filling and place this into a strong retort for distillation. As with the star Regulus of antimony, the iron will take up the sulfur from the cinnabar. Mercury metal will be reduced and begin to distill over. Some operators recommend using a 50-50 mixture of star Regulus and iron fillings for this distillation. In both cases, it is the subtle essence obtained from the iron itself that is key. Quote, the red solar sulfurous principle of iron, or its counterpart in Regulus of antimony, acts on the mercury with increasing force each operation, end quote. And that's from Lintott, from The Friend of Dawn, from 1700. The outlet of the distillation is led into a container of water, where the mercury vapor is condensed into a pool of bright shining mercury metal. The reaction can become quite vigorous, so careful heating and strong vessels are required, as is proper ventilation. An easy way to perform the distillations of mercury amalgam is to construct a small retort using iron pipe fillings from the hardware store. Pack charcoal briquettes around it and start the fire outside. Again, the outlet is submerged in a container of water, and the distillation of metallic mercury proceeds. When the distillation stops, be sure to remove the retort outlet from the water, or the vacuum created by the cooling retort will draw the water into the apparatus with possible dire consequences, i.e., explosion. Collect all of the mercury that distills and squeeze it through the chamois, and this will conclude one cycle or eagle. The process of making cinnabar with fresh native sulfur and its reduction by distillation with iron is repeated in this mercury until 7 eagles have flown. It is not that the mercury gets any more purified during this process, but its inner etheric shell of sulfurous and mercurial principles is activated. After the final eagle, distill the mercury 2 times by itself. This results in an animated mercury. Quote, it is the fertilized matrix in which you may plant your corn, end quote. The Alchemical Ribus, let's find out how to say it. Ribus. Dang, it didn't give me both that time, so. Pronunciation.
Ribus.
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 Ribus. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you. Ribus. Okay, the Alchemical Ribus. Once we have a supply of animated mercury from one of the above methods, or from the star Regulus of antimony method, the next step is to form the so-called Ribus, wherein the opposites are united. Take 4 parts of your animated mercury and carefully amalgamate it with 1 part of fine gold powder in a glass mortar. Wash the amalgam with water until it is clean and shining, then blot it dry with a cloth. Place the clean amalgam into a long-necked glass vessel so that only a third of it is filled. This should be made of strong glass and able to seal very tightly. Now warm the entire vessel and contents to about 50 degrees Celsius and quickly seal it airtight and allow it to cool a bit. In the old days, this was where the hermetic seal would be applied by heating the neck of the vessel and melting it closed. Today, glassware is available with precision ground joints and is sufficiently airtight for this. The sealed vessel is now set to digest at about 40 degrees to 50 degrees Celsius. After about 3 months at this heat, the matter will begin to darken and finally turn black. This is the so-called nigredo phase, or black stage. Once the matter is entirely black, gently raise the heat to about 60 degrees to 65 degrees Celsius and continue the digestion. After 2 to 3 months, the matter will acquire an iridescence at the surface with colors reminiscent of a peacock's tail, which is what the adepts called this stage. As the digestion continues, the matter will gradually become marking the beginning of the albedo stage, or whitening. It will take about 9 more months for the matter to become entirely white. When this happens, the heat is very slowly raised to about 130 degrees Celsius over the course of several months. The whiteness gradually gives way to a yellowness that deepens with time into red. This is the rubedo stage, or red stage, of the stone. Once this point is reached, the matter should be digested at about 200 degrees Celsius for the additional 2 months in order to mature. Allow the matter to slowly cool, then break the vessel to remove the contents, which is the red stone, in the first degree. Incineration. In order to effect metallic transmutations, the red stone must undergo some further processing. Once this happens, the stone is no longer used for medicine, but is solely dedicated to the purpose of transmutation. This final processing is called incineration, which means to make something like wax. Incineration augments the stone's fusibility and ingress into metals. That is, its ability to penetrate. Begin this by grinding a portion of the red stone to a powder, and then amalgamate it with 6 times its weight of animated mercury. Wash the amalgam with rainwater several times, then blot it dry with a cloth. Squeeze the dried amalgam through the chamois and save aside the mercury that passes through the chamois for later use. Collect the soft amalgam from inside the chamois and place into a tall glass vessel as before. The matter is now digested for 3 months at each of the 4 heats used in preparing the red stone, i.e. 40, 65, 130, then 200 degrees Celsius. At the end of the digestion, break open the vessel and remove the matter, which should now be easy to fuse like wax and not smoke at all. The red stone prepared in this way is now suitable for projection on metals. Multiplication of the red stone. Trace, welcome in. Did I miss her? There she is. Hello. It makes me think of glass blowing too. It makes me think of so many things. It's amazing. I love it. It also makes me think of metalworking and health, herbalism, how everything connects. Multiplication of the red stone. The red stone in the first degree is said to have the power to transmute metal in the ratio of 1 part stone to 10 parts metal. The stone's power can be increased tenfold in a process called multiplication. This process is very much like that of preparing the original red stone, only it takes much less time. Take 1 part of the red stone in the first degree and amalgamate it with 10 parts animated mercury. Wash the amalgam with rainwater, then blot it dry. Place the clean amalgam into a tall glass vessel and seal as before. Now begin the same regimen of heating and digestion starting at 40 degrees Celsius. The matter will undergo the same series of color changes, i.e. black, white, and finally red, but in a much shorter time. Increase the heat according to the color changes as before. After the red stage has been reached, the matter is cooled and removed from the vessel. The powder is now such that 1 part will act on 100 parts of metal. If we take this red stone and repeat the process of multiplication on it, 1 part will act on 1,000 parts of metal, then 10,000 parts, and so on. Remember that before the stone can be used for metallic transmutations, it must go through the process of incineration, whatever degree it has been multiplied to. Some believe it is quite dangerous to multiply the stone more than 7 times, and it is said to become first luminous, then unstable altogether, with the possibility of catastrophic consequences. Projection. The final test of the stone, and proof that the operator has worked correctly, is the transmutation of metals. Projection, in this term used to describe the addition of the perfected solar medicine to molten metals by projecting it on top of the melted matter in the crucible, resulting in its transmutation. Projection is the term used to describe the addition of the perfected solar medicine to molten metals by projecting it on top of the melted matter in a crucible, resulting in its transmutation. Depending on the quality and multiplication of the stone, more or less of it may be required to affect the transmutation of various metals. For example, if 1 part of the stone is found to act on 100 parts of pure silver, that same 1 part may only affect 10 parts of a more crude metal, such as tin or lead. Silver is a noble metal next to gold and often used as a guide in determining the strength of the red stone's power to affect transmutation. Let us say that we have the red stone multiplied to a strength of 1 part to 100 parts metal. Take 100 parts of pure silver metal and melt it in a crucible. When it is completely molten, take 1 part of the incinerated red stone and form it into several small balls or pills. Slowly add 1 pill at a time to the crucible and allow it to fuse with the silver. Continue adding the small pills until you have added the full 1 part. Keep the contents molten for an additional 2 hours as the metal matures and evolves. At the end of the 2 hours, allow the matter to cool slowly and then break it from the crucible. Now remelt the metal and cast it into an ingot. All of the silver should have changed to 24-karat gold. An assay of the metal may reveal the presence of silver which did not change. So the strength of the stone can be determined at, say, 180 to 1 instead of the expected 200 to 1. On the contrary, a portion of the metal may be melted with additional pure silver and reveal that it has strength to transmute even more than expected, say 300 to 1. This assessment of the stone's power will allow you to judge the proper amount to effect the transmutation desired, and yet not waste this most precious of medicines. The Elizabethan scholar, physician Dr. John Dee, and his alchemist associate Edward Kelly are said to have learned a painful lesson in this. Having come into possession of a quantity of the red stone, they proceeded to make various transmutations, only to discover later that the power of the stone was far greater than they had imagined. Unfortunately, they did not realize this until more than half of the stone had been used up. Wow. Conclusion. Other chemists I meet often ask me, "Is alchemy like chemistry?" To which I usually reply, "No, not really." Alchemy and chemistry parted ways centuries ago, and not under the best of terms. Over time, laboratory alchemy became even more obscured by the new terminology and goals of the developing science of modern chemistry. Most chemists today do not have a clue as to what alchemy is really about. The subject has had such a stigma placed on it from medieval times that much of its potential remains unexplored. Modern science has come a long way in the exploration of nature. Still, it is not all knowing. Around the turn of the 20th century, science reveled in the discovery of its three essential building blocks of matter, the proton, neutron, and electron, under the influence of the four fundamental forces. Later on, the fundamental particles themselves were found to be composed of a whole cornucopia of smaller particles, and some of these smaller particles were composed of yet smaller particles. It seems to go on, but we've reached some limitations in divisibility or in the determination of division, and it becomes a tangle of statistics and probabilities. Interestingly enough, the powers of mind begin to reveal themselves, and the observer becomes a key issue. At this quantum level of subtle matter, modern science recognizes the influence of mind. It also recognizes various modalities in time and space, like sheets or layers or spheres of being. It is starting to sound a bit like jabber. I told my mom about that even. Gibberish, jabberish, gibberish, gibberish, gibberish. That man, that alchemist. We mentioned earlier that science is coming full circle to that which was taught in the ancient mystery schools. Even modern medicinal science is beginning to recognize man's subtle energy structure, such as the acupuncture meridians. Practical alchemy has labored under a bad reputation, branded fraud, or at best pseudoscience by those with no practical experience in the matter at all. There are many secrets still hidden in the ancient art, waiting to be rediscovered by the practicing artist. As the alchemist known as Amagophon said, quote, "The disciple must exert himself to realize all his concepts," end quote. You have to do the work in order for the light to shine. Nature will do her part. The well-known occult writer Israel Regardie published a book entitled The Philosopher's Stone in 1938, right? I should know how to say that. Wherein he examines alchemy from several mystical and philosophical points of view. Later in life, he became a student of Frater Albertus at the Paraclesis Research Society, which opened his eyes. In his introduction to the second edition of the book, he had this to say regarding his experience of laboratory alchemy, quote, "It took no more than a few minutes to help me realize how presumptuous I had been to assert dogmatically that all alchemy was pseudo-spiritual. What I witnessed there, and have since repeated, has sufficed to enable me to state categorically that, in insisting solely on a mystical interpretation of alchemy, I had done a grave disservice to the ancient sages and philosophers," end quote. There is only one thing, the celestial fire, and we all have a part to play on its journey of self-realization. The great work is about following nature and helping nature in this unfoldment. The celestial fire is often termed the divine will. Our own will is the reflection of this fire which drives all of creation. Discovering our true will or purpose and fulfilling that purpose is the highest accomplishment of the alchemist and service to nature. Quote, "The secret of alchemy is this. There is a way of manipulating matter and energy so as to produce what modern scientists call a field of force. This field acts on the observer and places him in a privileged position within the universe. From this position, he has access to the realities which are ordinarily hidden from us by time and space, energy and matter. This is what we call the great work." Fulcanelli. And that is the end of the book. Hey, Simon, welcome in, man. So there is some, I'm going to read through this stuff just because it won't take long and it's very interesting. It's just like a page. So let me show you this table 1. Planet, sun, metal, gold, organ, heart, weekday, Sunday. So then we got moon, silver, brain, Monday, Mars, iron, gall or gallbladder, Tuesday, Mercury, lungs, Wednesday, Jupiter, tin, liver, Thursday, Venus, copper, kidney, Friday, kidneys, and Saturn, lead, spleen, and Saturday. All right. You even got to see my dirty fingernail. Dang it. Okay. And then table 2, herbs and planets. This table is just a short selection of common herbs and their planetary rulers. Most of these associations are taken from the 16th century herbalist Nicholas Culpeper's Complete Herbal, spelled Compleat, held in esteem by a number of alchemists, old and modern. Sun, angelica, bay, chamomile, celandine, eyebright, juniper, marigold, rosemary, rue, saffron, St. John's wort, sundew, and walnut. The moon is chickweed, cleavers, watercress, cucumber, lettuce, water lily, moonwort, wallflower, and willow. Mercury, wild carrot, caraway, dill, hazelnut, horehound, lavender, lily, licorice, marjoram, oats, parsley, parsnip, savory, honeysuckle, valerian. Venus, burdock, columbine, coltsfoot, daisy, eringo, featherfew, figwort, goldenrod, marshmallow, mint, motherwort, mugwort, catnip, pennyroyal, plantain, periwinkle, poppy, purslane, primrose, strawberry, yarrow. Mars, allheal, barberry, basil, garlic, gentian or gentian, I'm not sure, hawthorn, hops, nettle, onion, radish, rhubarb, tobacco, wormwood. Jupiter is melissa, milberry, borage, chervil, cinquefoil, balls, cinquefoil. I should know how to say that. Dandelion, dock, endive, hyssop, houseleek, melilot, oak, roses. And then Saturn is amaranthus, barley, corn, beet, comfrey, dodder, elm, fumitory, horsetail, holly, ivy, mullein, nightshade, shepherd's purse, blackhorn, woad, wintergreen, yew. Dude, there's a huge mullein plant in the drive where I park my vehicle. It's massive. There's wild catnip over there too. I just pull some up for marble each year. There's plantain all over. So that's the end, everyone. Dang, thank you so much, Robert Allen Bartlett. And all who came before, and all who are here right now. I love yous. Thank you. And maybe I'll see you later today. But I'll certainly see you soon, whenever that is. Take care of yourselves. I love yous. Mwah. Until then.